Mic check.
Testing, am I?
1.
Hello?
You're good.
Okay, I would like to call to order the Town of Vernon Plan Commission meeting on February 12, 2020. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag and a moment of silence. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll start with the roll call of the Plan Commission members and an open meeting law compliance check. Madam Clerk,
Chairman Carl Fortner.
present.
Supervisor Commissioner Jeff Millies.
Present.
Supervisor Commissioner Fred Mahalik.
Present.
Commissioner James Slawney. And Planner Zoning Administrator Sean Malarkey is here, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the agenda was posted inside and outside the Vernon Town Hall to the media, to businesses within the Town of Vernon, and on the Town of Vernon's website as a courtesy. You are in full compliance with the open meetings law.
Okay, thank you. We will start with item number 4, discussion and possible recommendation to the town board on a site plan of operation for D&J Sons for the Lot 2 of the certified survey map and tax key number as described in the agenda. The property is located on the south side of County Highway ES National Avenue, about approximately 1.5 mile west of 164 and County ES. We will ask our planner, Sean Malarkey, to kick us off and give us some background and review.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, Doug Minen is not here. I will go out, step out and call him. Do you want to take Pheasant Run while we wait?
Is there any objection? Yeah, the petitioner is not here as, yeah, I should have
I'm sorry,
figured that out too.
I just
We
noticed
will,
that.
yeah, we'll defer item 4. We would like the petitioner here, and we will go to item 5, which is Plan Commission discussion and possible recommendation to the town board on the following request for the ARM Group, Nick Flemma, Ron and Sarah Beam, for the Pheasant Run subdivision. It's located between Pheasant Hill and Oakdale Avenue, which is County XX. Tax key numbers are listed in the agenda. We've got 5 possible items here. Final plat. Number 2, construction civil plans, including master grading plan. 3 is landscape plan. Homeowners Association documents, articles of incorporation, bylaws, and declarations, and the land stewardship plan. So we'll ask our planner, Sean Malarkey, to kick us off and review your memo and where we are in the process, and we'll take the items one by one.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you've seen this a number of times. This was before you last month. The final plat was before you last month. It was tabled for a little more detail to be put into the final plat, and then some grading plans to be worked out to the satisfaction of the town engineer. And so they've resubmitted the final plat. They've submitted all the other items that you see on the agenda for potential approval today. I would note that the final plat has satisfied all of the planning comments, so I don't have any additional comments and concerns for the final plat. In terms of, I guess I'll just go through each of the documents and just highlight a couple of things, and then we can go from there. In terms of the landscape plans, they have provided a landscape plan. It basically shows landscaping along the landscape and drainage easement along Oakdale XX. There are 2 evergreen trees for each of lots 19 through 25 for a total of 14 trees. Lots 26 and 28 don't have trees. The reason behind that is because the topography drops off about 10 to 15 feet from the roadway in that section. The petitioner has stated that the intent isn't to necessarily screen the backyards and homes, but to break up the vista and not necessarily act as a buffer from that. There was also a requirement as part of the process in the residential allotment process to have trees planted in the front yards of each of the lots themselves. We have a requirement in our land division ordinance that requires 1 tree per every 100 feet to be planted. It was the Plan Commission and board's wish that those would not be in the right of way, but those would be on the actual private property. So that's addressed in the deed restrictions and not for the individual lot owners, and not, and I'll get to those in a minute, but not in the landscape plan. The other thing the landscape plan shows is at the intersection of Pheasant Drive and Oakdale Drive, there's a couple of monument signs that are shown there that not advertise, but to denote the subdivision itself, made of field stone and some architectural stone caps. That's surrounded by some ground cover, some decorative plantings, and then some evergreen trees as well. I will note that as shown on the plan, it's in the required vision corner, so that will have to be moved back and out of the vision corner itself. And then finally, there's a path that's shown between lots 7 and 8 that gets back into the conservation area. From where it goes from there, I'm not sure. I guess the applicant has mentioned that they're working with the Natural Resource Conservation Service on an overall plan for that outlet. So it remains to be seen where that path will go. So the Plan Commission is going to need to determine whether the landscaping as proposed is adequate. We don't have any specific requirements for subdivision landscaping, so it's up to you. I mentioned the signage as well. They've also provided a land stewardship open space plan for Outlot 1, the 37.85 acre outlot. The land stewardship plan is written in recordable format, so it can be recorded in perpetuity against the property, so that the land is maintained and managed on an ongoing basis. It talks about a 6.7 acre shaped property, or area of the property, and a 9.15 acre portion of the property. These were previously used for ag, or currently used for ag, and some of it wetland. This would be restored by establishing and maintaining native grasses, etc. And then the forested area is a 22 acre portion of the property that includes a mix of oak, maple, ash, some red pine. The plan there is to remove invasive species and return it to its native state as much as possible. My only comments on the land stewardship plan is that the exhibits are missing, so we're going to need the exhibits before it gets recorded. It's mentioned as Pheasant Ridge as part of the land stewardship plan. That should be changed to Pheasant Run. And then under the section for prohibited uses, there should be language included that prohibit motorized vehicles for recreational use should be restricted. And then the same restrictions that are written on the final plat notes in terms of the environmental corridor should be added to the land stewardship plan, so that it's got to be, it's just lockstep with the plat requirements. In terms of the declaration of covenants, restrictions, and easements, I had a few minor comments. It refers to the land stewardship plan in these declaration of covenants, but it says the land stewardship plan applies to outlots 1 and 2, and so the land stewardship plan itself only applies to outlot 1, so those should be made consistent. It does meet as part of the development control process, the allotment process, it was determined that the minimum lot size or minimum home size for single-family homes would be 1,875 square feet, 2,500 square feet for two-story homes. They're meeting or exceeding that in the declaration of covenants. They're also meeting the requirement that all home exterior wall surfaces are 100% natural materials. And that there's another condition in there that requires that all eaves, steps, overhangs, attached porches, patios, and other appurtenances of the homes must be located within the building envelope, the minimum setbacks and offsets. I would just note that in the town of Vernon, we do allow the eaves and the roof overhangs to extend 24 inches, 2 feet, so I don't know if you want to clarify that in your deed restrictions, so it's the same as our ordinances. And so the only real comment that I have, and we discussed this a little bit, I discussed this with the town chairman. The requirement, again, was one street tree for every 100 feet on the private lots. And the covenants say one tree per lot along the street. Basically, it's going to require 4 total, but only says one street tree. And so some of these lots are 150 plus lineal feet, so it wouldn't meet the requirement. So we would ask that you would require 2 of those to be within 20 feet of the right-of-way.
Sean, I think it was a typo.
Oh, okay, good.
I'm trying to pull it back.
So it would actually be more than 1 for every 100, but
Yeah,
it
yeah.
would satisfy the requirement. Those are all the comments that I had in the documents. I know the town engineer, on the grading plan and construction plans, he had a couple comments. The plan for the roadway connection to the existing Pheasant Drive, he noted that you should make the driveways themselves the high points. He wanted to see a little more additional detail in terms of the ditch slopes and the stationing added to it. He also mentioned that even the grading plans do show suggested grades on the individual lots themselves, but it doesn't denote what those grades are for, whether they're the yard elevation or the first floor elevation, so those have to be added to that plan itself.
Suggested yard is the garage sill, but
Sure, so he's asking for clarification as to what those are, and he's asking for,
again, we're assuming that when you build a house.
sure, just, yep, well, let me just finish the report, and then we can get to the details. So he's asking for first floor elevation, yard grade, and garage grades for each lot. And again, Waukesha County is also requiring the master grading plan as part of this, and so they will also review and may have additional comments on it as well. But in general, the engineer didn't have any concerns necessarily with the overall grading and thought that the preliminary plat could be approved, the final plat could be approved pending those details be worked out prior to recording of the final plat or start of construction. The surveyor still has some minor comments as well. Nothing substantive in terms of the overall layout of the plat, but just some technical details that also could be tuned up prior to recording or the start of construction. So, with that said, I have a series of potential motions, one for the final plat and series of conditions, one for the master grading plan, the landscape plan and signage, homeowners association documents, including the articles of incorporation, bylaws, and declaration of restrictions. I would note that the attorney still has not reviewed the articles of incorporation, the bylaws, and the declaration of restrictions. And then finally, the land stewardship plan. So if you have questions for me or the applicant, I'd be happy to entertain them.
I have a few questions, so I think what we should do, since there's 5 documents, I think we should maybe go through each document and try to stay, within a document so that we're not jumping all over and we can stay focused on trying to get done what we want to get done tonight, if possible. So I'll start with the final plat, that's letter A on the agenda. It's, to me, helpful that it's almost in final form and ready to go. I did have a question. I understand that, when we looked at this subdivision and scored it, we said the minimum home size will be 1,875 feet, but I think you're requiring 2,000. So shouldn't the deed restriction be 2,000 then?
In terms of their declaration is going to include that 2,000 in there. And so my conditions, so I have a series of conditions.
Right.
And so those conditions were just carried over from the development review. They're going to exceed that, but that was still the requirement from the development review, the preliminary plat, and the final. That's all we're requiring, and so they're exceeding that, and that's okay.
It just gives the architectural review board, as part of that homeowners association, you get a little leeway in there if somebody comes in at 1965 or something. So, I think, again, we met the requirement.
Yeah, so I guess.
It's a question, it's
My
a question
point
when I
is,
see
we
2,000 everywhere
all-
and then one place
Yes.
1875.
So-
We're
Yeah.
pushing for
Yeah.
that, it's just,
Okay.
So all through the process, we've said 1875, and so that's still what our requirement is. If they want to make their covenants more
Tougher,
than that,
sure.
they can do that.
Okay, and now on the trees, let me see on these trees, I still am not quite I follow, the issue on the tree, front yard trees, is the one tree every 100 feet.
Correct.
And how's that, and then you said no?
They said they'll provide 2 for every lot, so that's basically 1 for
Okay.
every 75 feet. is what
Okay,
they're
so where are the 2 trees going to be?
within 20 feet
In
of
the
right
final
of way.
plat, in the deed restriction, or
In the
where's it?
deed restrictions, yes.
Okay.
And that's where it's noted now as the 1.
Okay.
They're requiring a landscape plan for the architecture review board for 4 trees. Right now, it says 1 tree has to be a street, like near the street. They're gonna change that to be 2 within 20 feet.
Okay, so it'll read, I'm looking at your report, sorry, page 5, I guess it is, number 2, letter B. Says for each 100 linear feet of road within the subdivision, 1 tree shall be planted on each side, so that will be 2 trees will be planted?
No, that was that's what was our requirement.
Okay, that's that's our
And
requirement.
so they're going to now plant 2 per lot, which basically equates to about 1 per 75.
Okay, so where is that going to be? Shouldn't that be in the final plat?
That's nothing to do with the plat, it'll be in the declaration of covenants and restrictions.
Okay, so that'll be in the declarations.
Yes, and so that's one of the changes we're requesting tonight, and so that will be, when they resubmit that for final approval, we'll be checking to make sure that's in there.
Okay, so, and the declarations, of course, get recorded too, also.
Correct.
Okay. So, other questions on the final plat for either the petitioners or Sean? Supervisor, Commissioner Mahalik.
Chairman has done an excellent job. I just, minor, what type of trees are we going to be planted?
The street trees,
Yes.
well, they have evergreen and pine trees shown in the backyards of the lots along
Okay.
Oakdale. In terms of the trees that'll be planted in the yards, I don't think there was a requirement, though I could be wrong. Do you guys know if there was a
There's no
requirement?
requirement, I mean, it'll be some, we had some email exchange on this, I mean, it'll be some variety, if you will, to not, plant one species, I mean, the forester we will hire to provide us the forestry plan. I mean, he's got some pretty strong opinions about, variety would be the best thing to do in light of how much ash is around Waukesha County, so I can tell you it won't be ash. But it'll be a mix probably of birch, oak, maple, probably a mix of those 3 deciduous trees.
This is not meant to be an obstruction question, okay? But we've got a real problem right now going on with some of the evergreens, okay? Where there's some type of, I don't know, I'm gonna call it a virus, for lack of a
You
better
mean the
word.
orange rust, right?
I don't know what it is, but I've had to have some of our trees sprayed and it saved them. But in the area that I'm in, it's just been devastated. And that's the only reason is to your arborist or whoever is doing it to make sure that the trees are somewhat impervious to what we now know to be going on.
Well, and this particular gentleman is not a fan of evergreen trees to
Oh,
begin with, so, the architectural review board will push for deciduous trees in the front yards.
Good. Okay.
Whether it's salt or ice melt, something's, I know what you're talking about.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions on the final plat? Okay, can we go to the next one, and then we'll come back and make motions in case something occurs to someone and we have to go backpedal. So now we're looking at the construction civil plans, including a master grading plan. And here, Sean, I'm on your page 6 of your report.
Correct, and so the town engineer still has, some tweaks and he wants to see another revision of it to address the cul-de-sac, temporary cul-de-sac and the elevations from, that are noted on each lot. But again, he's satisfied enough to approve the final plat, but that should be reviewed by the town engineer again. And whether or not you want to make it a condition of approval that it's got to come back for plan commission approval or not, or leave it up to town engineer to work out the details, that is up to you.
So,
Does that have to be part of the motion?
So the condition currently says that the petitioner shall satisfy all comments, conditions, and concerns of the plan commission, board, engineer, et cetera, for the construction and civil grade plans. They could approve that motion as it is, and so just knowing that he still has to satisfy the engineer's conditions, that would be good enough. If you tabled that item, that means it would have to come back to the plan commission. If you approve it with that condition, that means you just have to satisfy the staff's concerns.
Those were minor changes for us. We just didn't want to make it till we came back to planning commission in case they had some other additional things they wanted to flag, all the changes that were. So that's why we did the plan, sending them another.
So on that motion, if you want to table it, then it's coming back here. If we don't want to table it and just approve it subject to
To that condition,
to
right.
that condition, and we'd be looking mostly to the town engineer.
Right, and you're probably relying mostly on the town engineer on that one anyways, in terms of the grades and the you know, the contouring of the land. So we would be comfortable if you approved it and left it at the staff, but it's certainly your prerogative.
Or prerogative on that. Any other questions before we move to the landscape? Okay, let's go to the landscape, also on page 6 in Sean's report. Here again, it's the visual corner, vision corners. I think you understand. I'm assuming you understand that. So
Yeah.
that's going to be no big deal, and you agree that it's
Yep.
needs to be fixed, okay? Which obviously is a safety thing, and we gotta, have that. It's got to be conditioned on that if we're sending it on. But is there anything else that the plan commission would need to see before sending it on and table this, or is it ready to go? It's subject to, town board, town planner, so. Easy enough to check the vision corners, right, Sean?
Yeah, that's simple enough. So they got an updated plan, I could say, yep, out of the vision corners, good to go. So the other things you're looking at are the evergreen pine trees along XX, and then obviously their path is in there as requested and required that gets back to the conservation area.
Should we address the path here or address it in the conservation area?
As part of the land stewardship plan.
It's land, as part of the land, yes. Or address it both places.
The land stewardship plan, as written, doesn't require that the path is in there. It's required as part of the landscape plan that goes back. Ultimately, we don't necessarily want to tell them exactly how the layout of the path has to be within the we're concerned that the neighbors, the residents that live here can get back to that area. And so we require that a path be put in between those lots. Beyond that, where it goes in the Conservancy, I wasn't too concerned about a final layout of that, and I know they're working with the conservation group to design that. They're allowed to put that in per the land stewardship plan. They're allowed to passive use of the area, and they're allowed to do certain things with it. And so I didn't have any concerns with it. If you do and you wanted to see more detail, you certainly could ask for that.
And a little clarity on that, the soil conservationists at the NRCS in Union Grove, I can tell you for sure, it's not gonna be a paved path by any means, because they're not a fan of that. So if you've ever been in the state of Wisconsin or DNR forest, they're dirt paths, they're mulch, if anything at best, right? So maybe wood. So again, I guess the goal is kind of minimal disturbance of that area as it gets seeded down and gets set to as minimally disturbed as possible. So by all means, I mean, we would love to, have some type of path there to walk through. But again, the overriding goal is minimal disturbance of the area after it's been seeded down and planted per the NRCS specs that are in that binder. I don't think you guys all got a copy of that binder.
Yeah,
but-
we did.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, we did.
Okay, good.
Right.
So, again, this gal, I mean, she's a pretty sharp gal. We're working with her to do it as, what's the word for it, as environmentally conscious as possible, I guess you could say. But I will tell you today, you can get back there on that path as designed, and you can walk all over the place. It's a pretty open forest. I mean, there's a big canopy there, you can walk around, you can walk into that back field, so quite frankly, there's nothing to prevent homeowners from establishing their own path. But again, right now, it's working in concert with her to figure out, okay, what does it look like? But I can tell you for sure, asphalt probably out of the question.
So on the landscape plan, it's called a paved path.
Right.
And so,
Back to that.
so you do want to have it asphalt back to that,
Just back to the back.
to the edge of the lots?
The edge of the lots, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So would
But not going into the, I mean, it would go into the EC a little bit, I guess you could say, if you went back to the back lots, but, you get it. I mean, the point of the path is to make it as, I'm not a soil conservationist, but is
As pervious as possible,
Okay,
yeah.
there you go.
But it is paved back to the environmental area.
Correct.
So there's 8 foot wide, 300 feet approximately between those two lots.
And so,
And who owns that? It's just an easement or,
no, it's part of the Outlot One, which is owned
Part of
by
Outlot
the
One.
association.
okay?
Which I guess brings us, I know we talked about this point before in the land stewardship plan, I know we're still in the landscape plan here, but on the land stewardship plan, it mentions that, that the binding party was your group. And so I wonder if that outlot is owned by the owners, the homeowners association, if that should be the responsible party.
I think it would be, yeah, because it's, once all the lots are sold, like when you buy a lot, you're gonna be getting.
Right. You shouldn't be on the hook in perpetuity
Exactly.
for ongoing maintenance and management, so.
Yeah.
That was, Carl, that was one of the
Yeah,
things
that
that
was one of the
that you
things.
pointed out, that it should,
Yeah, let's put it this way, Sean, I mean, sorry to interrupt, but, I mean, our attorney's been instructed to make sure that as soon as it gets turned over to the homeowners association, that, the development corporation's out, so.
right, but it's not, because the land stewardship plan has the Army Group as part of that.
Right.
And so you'll be tied to that
Yeah.
maintenance
We'll have to
long-term.
follow the
Okay.
change, because that's not the intent.
Sure,
So.
okay.
Okay, yeah, that was, we had a call yesterday with the attorney, who has not reviewed any of these, and I was hesitant to have him do it without talking to you first, because it's your chargeback.
That's a good
Cut-
catch.
be- Because I wanted to make sure you guys were ready, so we didn't get a bunch of comments, oh, what about this, this, and this? And you have to redo it, then we'll have to relook at it, so I was just trying to
Thank you.
shortcut
Yeah,
that
Thanks.
process, so when we get there, we can go through, because those are the things I marked, because it didn't make sense to me. And not, it wasn't in the normal course where at the end of the, some 80% lots built out, or whatever the standard is, it's deeded over to the homeowners, how many lots, 30? 1/30th each, I guess it'd be, right?
So we'd have to update that land stewardship.
Right, and, it's, obviously, it's mostly the homeowners that buy, and that live there are gonna care about this, but from a town's perspective, we gotta look for, who's gonna maintain it, who's the owner, who's paying taxes.
So we're still in the landscape plan. Any other comments on that one?
Okay. Homeowners Association documents, which includes the articles of incorporation, bylaws, and declaration of restrictions. Again, we didn't put them to legal review because we
Right.
wanted to talk to you first to make sure that they were ready for our legal review. Because, one review, hopefully we're done,
Yeah.
so we gotta get them exactly the way you want them. And again, from a town of Vernon standpoint, I don't know that we necessarily care how you guys elect a president and things like that, but there are some things that we care about, and so we can talk about those, or you could probably guess which ones we care about, which would be who's paying, what I just said,
Right.
who owns it, who's gonna pay the taxes, and, any other special charges, who's gonna do the maintenance, and what happens if it's not done. And then, of course, since the town of Vernon has some interest in this, but not, not the entire document, I think we, look at how it can be amended. We don't want a document that we approve that the next day can be amended without our consent. So
Right.
whether we need to consent to every single thing in here, not necessarily, like you want to change your method of electing your president, you shouldn't have to come back to the
Right.
town for that, nor do we want to see it, quite frankly. So, I mean, right now, for example, 4.03, you can amend it after approval by the Vernon Town Board, provided you get your 70%. Well, I mean, it can be worded that way, but I think our attorney comment will say, well, gee, do you guys want to look at the way they, just my example, how they elect a president, and then come back? I mean, that'd be kind of a waste of the town of Vernon's time. So if there's a way, we're not going to object, I don't think, if you restrict our approval rights to specific sections that we would care about,
Okay.
right? The taxes, the
Yep.
ownership, the maintenance, those kind of things. So I'm not sure if we should, table that to give you guys another shot, and then we can get it to attorney review, or,
Could I ask that the attorney just redline the copy,
You-
send us comments back?
You could.
could.
So just to maybe back up, my only comments were on the restrictions, not the bylaws. or
right,
the-
okay?
And so that's all I cared about, and so that you have my comments on those, one of them was the trees and so on and so forth. And so the plan commission still could choose to approve these documents pending legal review. And so
Right.
if you chose to do that.
Well,
Or
we're
you
are we-
could-
we're
or
not
you could have
really
them-
approving them, we're recommending the town board approval, but
Exactly,
subject to legal review, and of course, subject to all of your,
correct. So,
Sean, on the stormwater management plan and the stormwater storage facilities, we normally prepare the document for the maintenance agreement between the county and the developer.
right.
But maybe the town of Vernon may be different. Should we keep that with the county or the
The,
town?
the county may want the town to be party of that, I'm not sure.
We just use their standard format.
Yeah, whatever the,
And what it says is that they'll maintain it, and if they don't, the county can come in there and maintain it and then charge.
Charge back.
All the owners on their property.
that or sometimes it's the town that
Yeah, so
would go.
that's, normally we would have done this for the county, but if you let the town be party.
I think the county's gonna make a recommendation on that, one way or the other, and late, and,
You don't care either way.
well, I personally don't, the town engineer
We'll
may.
work that out with the county.
Right. And so one of the conditions of approval of the final plat itself is that they satisfy all conditions of Waukesha County, town engineer, in terms of the stormwater management plan and the maintenance agreement. So that's tied to the plat itself.
to the final plat itself.
The final plat approval includes a condition that they satisfy all Waukesha County comments, town engineer comments, et cetera.
And if we don't, the county has the right to come in and do it, and then charge everybody
Right.
for each repairs or costs.
Okay, so can we circle back a little bit on the declaration of restrictions? If I hear you correctly, maybe you're looking for approval as opposed to table and fix them up a little bit. But if we're gonna approve subject to conditions, I just wanna run through those conditions to make sure you're square on them, so that,
That's fine.
on page 2, you say, make it this is page 3, sorry, your comments now. On page 2, definitional land stewardship plan applies to outlets 1, 2, and any other comment, but the LSP only applies to outlet 1, so that needs to be fixed, right? And I assume you're agreeable with that.
Yep.
We talked about the 1875 square foot on single family, so you wanna leave it at 1875, although
The restrictions will say 2,000.
your
Yeah.
restrictions. So the declaration of restrictions will say 2,000,
Correct.
okay? Home exterior wall services, is that not in there, Sean?
It is in there, I'm just pointing out that they're meeting whatever.
Oh, they're meeting it,
requirements are.
okay, so
Yep.
that's really not that's a comment, that's not a.
Correct.
You better fix, we'll approve it or recommend approval to the town board, provided you fix this, and this, okay? So there's nothing there.
Yeah, where I've underlined things, that's where
Okay,
things need to be changed.
and then you'll figure out the eaves and whether or not you can be more
They
restrictive.
can be.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
can be.
I mean, if you wanna, the homeowners might want that extra 2 feet. I mean, basically, it shaves 2 feet off the setbacks, right? Or
Right.
up to 2 feet.
Right.
But you guys may say, no, we want
Yeah.
50 feet at least between the houses, 25 each side. So that's on, you guys. Because I don't know that the town of Vernon cares. If we did, we'd have a different ordinance, right?
Correct. So, yeah, and any application that comes to us for a zoning permit or a building permit, we review it only per town ordinances. And so I obviously check because I check the restriction, the house size is big enough, but I'm not gonna go through all your restrictions and make sure. Your architectural review board does that first and then approves it, and then it goes on to us.
But your review board is following this document, so
Right.
that's, And then the landscape plan, and that's where that's where the trees are coming in, the 2 trees, is that right?
2 trees per lot that will be close to, within 20 feet of the right of way.
So that'll be, if we approve it, it'll be a condition.
Condition on that, right?
Right.
The language on that, again, Sean, within 20 feet.
Yeah, that was what the requirement was when the residential development got approved, and so within 20 feet of the right of way.
Right. Remember when we had that, they started kind of in the right of way, we said, no, no. We're cutting trees in right of ways now, so. We like the trees, just not in the right of way. Any other thing then, Sean, on that? Any questions?
No? I know you made one comment when you reviewed it with me about the land stewardship plan. And
Right.
there was an amendment provision there that allows amendment without town approval. And so that was a discussion item.
Well, we'll get to that one next. I assume subject to legal review, the bylaws, and your incorporation documents. I mean, your attorney should be able to write those, but, and so maybe those documents, should be ready to go.
Yeah.
And I don't, they're subject to our attorney's review, but he's representing the town of Vernon, and he's not gonna make a comment on when you have your meetings, Okay, so land stewardship plan, and this is the document that I was having the most difficulty with when I was reading it, and specifically, the taxes, and you've clarified it. The document as written talks about the grantor, which is your corporation, being liable for the taxes forever. And, I flagged that, so that needs to be fixed up. The amendment provision, again, town board, or the town of Vernon should have some approval rights as to the sections that the town of Vernon is concerned about.
Right.
Like ownership, maintenance, and taxes. And then there's, we didn't get this far with the attorney, but there's paragraph 13 that in certain circumstances, the outlots would be turned over to the town of Vernon, and I'm not sure if that's,
No, the outlets would be partially owned by each one of the lot owners.
yeah.
Right, and
So they would never get turned over.
well, sometimes you see it written, if the town agrees, basically, for whatever reason, hey, we need a park, they're willing to donate this, and here it is. But obviously, that's not the intent here.
Right. Yeah, there's no intent to make it a Vernon Park, for
No.
example.
Right, and there's even a provision that it's not usable by the public. I think it states that not for public recreation.
Yeah, it's basically a private park for the subdivision, is what you're
Correct.
saying. Questions on the land stewardship plan? Would it make sense to table that and you guys come back with a revised draft before with these kind of changes, that's quite a few changes for our attorney to chug through without town boards next week. But we do have a plan, if this is the only thing left, And we could do that on March 20th, too.
Well, the thing
not
that,
critical
the thing
on
they
your
still
timeline,
haven't,
is
the
it?
thing they have not done yet is the developer's agreement and then the letter of credit. That
Right.
would be,
That's
that's
coming.
town board only, not
Right.
planning commission. So that's still forthcoming as well.
Right, and our town engineer has got to work with you to set the dollar amount.
Correct.
Yep.
On that letter of credit. But the letter of credit is mostly legal, right? And the developer's agreement is, there's obviously substance to it, but it's,
Right.
a lot of that's legal too.
Right.
And we haven't even started that, have we?
They have the model development agreement, and I think your attorney's working on it now,
Okay,
from John, right?
from John, right, so
They
you're
are
starting
all
with,
pretty most, the
They're
same.
pretty standard. It's
Yeah, it's-
basically
it's-
just, it's a protection for the developer and the town in terms of things are gonna get built the way they say they're gonna be built.
Not that difficult anymore.
Right.
right, we're not starting from
No,
whole cloth, yeah, there's a basic form of agreement that you
biggest
start
issue is
with,
to get the cost for the engineering estimates
right?
for the bond.
So in terms of the land stewardship plan, I don't have any additional comments on it as long as they meet my comments. I know Attorney Macy will have some comments and tune-up. You've obviously made some comments, so again, it's up to the planning commission whether or not you want to see it again after the next version or allow staff to handle the details.
Right, Plan Commission, you got commissioners, you have questions on, we're on land stewardship plan now, so.
On the land stewardship portion, does that restrict future building on that land
Correct.
for forevermore?
Well, the plat does anyways. The plat restricts it regardless, but the land stewardship plan reinforces that it's only used for certain things.
Okay.
And again, that's recorded on the property. So it doesn't mean it couldn't be removed. Anything could change, right? The plat could be, they could come back in with the plat from a future plan commission, the board, and they can say, yep, now you can develop that outlet. They can allow the removal of that deed restriction potentially. So it's perpetuity until a future body would change it.
But it would have to come to
Have
the
to come to the town.
town, okay. And then on the declaration of restrictions, in some cases, they're more restrictive than our town laws. As an example of chickens, you say no chickens, and yet in the town, we say you can have chickens. Or the signs, I guess, is the one that bothered me the most. The only sign allowed is the for sale sign. And I was thinking of, like our political signs when people are running for office.
They can't stop that. I mean, that's protected speech.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
All right, thought it might have been.
So I don't know, did you have a caveat for election signs or not? But it doesn't matter if you do or you don't, because people can put an election sign up to a certain size.
Okay. Oh, yeah, that would be, the no signs is a private covenant between the owners of those lots, right? So if you guys want to restrict, only for sale and it's 3 feet or no chickens or no solar panels, which is what you do. Now, some people may argue that state law overrides that, but I don't believe it necessarily does. And the political signs, I think there's court cases that say you can't restrict
a
political
certain
signs, no matter
size.
what you say.
Right.
So,
Yeah. I don't think so.
but, I don't think we're
Not,
not in that minutia with your,
Yeah.
Okay,
this.
or at least I wouldn't be.
It started as a document that probably is the same document for 100 different subdivisions in southeastern Wisconsin.
yeah,
But no, we're not opposed to
okay.
freedom of speech or anything else.
And the one thing on the outlot that I'll say, even if you had, the owners wanted to do something with that outlot, sell it or something like that, or redivide it, and even if the town agreed, I think that you need a circuit court judge to agree because it's semi-public interest, some public, so somebody could challenge that court, you'd have to have the judge sign off too, so.
It'd be tough, not to mention the county
It's
and the
mentioned, it's in the deed
extraterritorial and everything
restrictions,
else.
It's on the plan. I've never seen it over.
I've never seen them reverted either.
So,
Okay.
Following up on the signs, for election signs, is there a size restriction?
I think it's 4 by 8.
That's, okay.
I think, is that, yeah.
And
So it's a
Yeah,
piece of plywood.
It's big as a piece of plywood, and And that's by state ordinance, state statute, excuse me. Although, again, if somebody would challenge that, that might be struck down. Yeah,
Yeah.
to find out, right? I've seen bigger. Sides of barns. Okay, so any other comments on land stewardship plan or questions? We have them here, so.
I guess, I just have a question in general. In terms of the county process, I know you're working through stormwater, you're working through plat review. Have you submitted the land stewardship plan to the county? Because I know that was one of the,
We just thought, my policy is always get the local planning commission first. Because
okay.
you guys are the only guys who really look at it. You can live with it every day, so we want, every goes like it sounds like it's tomorrow or the next day.
But just so you know, they
Take care of
are requiring the land stewardship plan as well. So they may tweak it, based, even after our comments a little bit,
So
so.
I've had some discussions with Ben because we were originally gonna try and get it over to the Waukesha Conservation League and they didn't want it, so,
The deed land to them?
yeah.
Would you recommend we take it to them now?
Well, just know they're gonna have suggestions on, so they may, even after we approve the land stewardship plan, the county also has to approve it, so the condition that I've written in there is that they have to satisfy all the comments, concerns and conditions of Vernon Plan Commission, Town Board, Town Attorney, Town Planner, and the Waukesha County Department of Land Resources, so even after, there's going to be tweaks after it leaves this body
Yeah, we've had a lot
as
of
well.
those discussions at the preliminary plan stages too,
Yeah.
so normally the county, the preliminary plan's a lot more,
Important, right,
and they do a lot more work in the preliminary
Yeah.
plans.
right.
And it also gotta go to the big benefits, but I don't,
They're not gonna look at the land stewardship
I
plan,
don't look
though.
at
Right.
Do you guys have anything to add, change?
No, not at this point. We're hoping that we don't have to come back, with all due respect.
Okay.
We've been at this, I think, for about a year, so we're looking to just keep moving forward and with conditions, understanding that if Attorney Macy has something, I'm sure the way he would write it up might be a little different than what we might tweak it to say, but we're gonna be most likely fine with things like that, and same with Sean.
And the
So-
town engineer, yeah.
Yeah,
If
there's
for some
enough
reason
people that
we can't
still-
reach an agreement, we're gonna bring it back.
Yeah.
Commissioners, any further questions? Should we go to the motion? Should we just go through back to the agenda and look for motions? Okay, we'll start with the final plat. Sean's got suggestion motions in here. So, starting on page 5.
Yes.
Obviously, we need to make sure our motions are consistent and worded properly. So final plat, I think, if I'm reading the board here, we got a consensus to have the Plan Commission recommend to the Town of Vernon Board approval of the final plat, subject to the conditions as outlined and as discussed in our Plan Commission meeting tonight.
Is that a motion or?
Yeah, yes, the 7 conditions. Yeah, I can make that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay. Should there be a date on that as to what we're referring to in your motion?
Yep,
Could you put, yeah,
yeah,
whatever date?
it's February 12th, yes. And we'll have a friendly amendment with that, with friendly second by
That'd be fine.
Commissioners Solani. Discussion on the final plat motion. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, we'll go to the construction civil plans, including the master grading plan here. The motion will be, and I'll make the motion here. Town of Vernon Plan Commission recommends to the Town of Vernon Board approval of the construction civil plans and master grading plans, subject to the conditions as stated in the February 12th, 2020 full memorandum, staff review memorandum,
And I'll second that.
seconded by Commissioner Supervisor Mahalik. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Landscape plan and signage. I can make the motion as well, that, a motion to have the Vernon Plan Commission recommend to the Vernon Town Board approval of the landscape plan and signage as, subject to the conditions in the February 12th, 2020 full staff review report. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Homeowners Association documents, articles of incorporation, bylaws, and declaration of restrictions. Here, we should probably make these subject to legal review, although your conditions do say
It
comments
includes
can,
town
yeah.
attorney.
I guess it is subject to, yeah, I guess it is subject to legal review. I don't know that we have to necessarily, separately state that.
We do or don't?
Don't.
It's in there.
It's,
Subject to plan commission, town board, town attorney, town planner.
That's fine.
I'm not in
That's
there.
fine, that's fine. That's fine.
yeah, so it is a condition, so if we reference the conditions in the February 12th, 2020, it'll pick up legal review. So I can go ahead and make that motion that the Plan Commission recommend to the Vernon Town Board approval of the Homeowners Association documents, which include articles of incorporation, bylaws, and declaration of restrictions, subject to the conditions set forth in the February 12th, 2020 full staff review report. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
on page, I believe it's 5, is there one more motion that we have to make regarding the final plat request? Or is that something,
Yeah.
all right?
You did that one first, right?
did
That was the
Right,
first
we did
one
that
we did.
first.
Oh, then I missed, okay, sorry, I apologize.
Right, and as a point of clarification, when we referenced your February 12th, that includes our discussion and the modifications, for example, the 2 trees that people have agreed to.
Yep,
and that.
it says petitioner shall satisfy all comments, conditions, and concerns of the town Vernon Plan Commission Board, so it includes all of our comments.
Comments today, right. Just to clarify that,
No
you know
problem.
what's being approved.
Yep.
And the town board knows is being recommended.
Right.
Right? So now we're to the land stewardship plan, and as mentioned, I'm a little bit concerned about it, but I want to see how the rest of the commission feels. It is subject to, if we follow the following conditions, it will be subject to all of them: Plan Commission, Town Board, Town Attorney, Town Planner, Waukesha County, right? And I know and you've agreed with making those changes.
It's a good catch.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
I mean, and it's to it's to your interest too, so I know
Yeah.
that they will get done, so it's not a point of contention.
Is that a motion?
Well, I said I had a concern, I'll let someone else make the motion.
Did you make that, Jim?
I will make that same motion.
I got it, sir.
Is there a second?
And I'll second.
Any discussion, any further discussion? Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, motion carries. We'll get it done, we'll check it.
Mr. Chairman, are these going to be on the agenda, town board agenda next week?
Right, should we, if we can send them off for as much review as we need from the town attorney, and we can schedule them on the 20th if they're ready. I would think so. If not, we'll have a meeting first Thursday in March. You
Yeah.
ready and with the revisions and so on? It'd be helpful.
Do you have a preference, is the 20th or the first weekend?
For first Thursday in March.
What do you think that time
March
is?
6th
March 6th?
or February?
March
20th?
5th is fine.
March 6th?
Yeah, because we're gonna split the county, it's gonna get to the Big Bend, so. March is fine. March 1st. March is fine.
Okay, so the first Thursday in,
Okay, I just,
John's
need-
gotta look at it too, so.
yeah, I just need to know for, for the agenda, so we'll schedule it that first.
first Thursday in March. We can get it on the town board agenda.
It'll be fine.
And if necessary, if something doesn't go through the town board, gets thrown back to the plan commission, we can get it right on the plan commission in March, if we need to.
But we don't want to see you guys anything else. We've seen
Will you make the changes before the board meeting?
I'll probably make them next, before I submit to the county. I'll just-
All the documents that we talked
Legal
about?
documents will be done tomorrow, but
Okay. Just so the board has a clean copy to look at least
Right.
based on tonight's comments.
we're very
Right.
motivated, so yes.
Okay.
Legal change will be made right away.
Okay, so we can get it on the town board.
And maybe the town attorney, I'm not sure of his schedule, but hopefully he can review prior to the.
Right, if you can get documents tomorrow for his review, I mean, you want to pay just for one review,
Yeah.
so.
Yep.
And the quicker we can get on his schedule and calendar, the better. I know he's real busy now, too.
Yeah,
It's
So-
still John, right? It's still-
John Macy, right?
smile, Paul.
Right.
I know what he wants, but I'm with him.
Well, that'll make,
Yeah, that's good. I like John. I have no problem with it.
so we can get it on the town board agenda for March 6th. If something, the town board, if it gets sent back to the plan commission, we can get it right back on the plan commission March 12th. If we have to,
Okay.
the plan commission has, and then we can get it back to the town board on March 20th, so,
Before our deadline.
I'll talk
you're right.
to Ben.
Yeah.
And the deadline's the 21st, so,
Okay.
which is why we picked the 21st.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Mr. Munnings here.
And Mr. Mining is here. Sorry you missed your spot. So, Mr. Mining, come up and we'll circle back to item 4 on the agenda, which we deferred pending Mr. Mining's appearance, and that is discussion and possible recommendation to the town board on a site plan of operation for D&J and Sons for Lot 2 in the legal description tax keys as listed on the agenda. This is the property on County ES, National Avenue, approximately 1.5 mile west of the intersection of 164 and County ES, and it's on the south side of this, of ES. So I'll ask our planner, Sean Malarkey, to kick off the discussion.
So last month, just a quick recap, the plan commission recommended approval of a rezone of the property from A2, was it A2? A5 to, A5 to B3. The county was here, there was a joint public hearing. The board did approve that, and so the rezoning is still pending county approval of both the town and the county map amendments for the property. I did speak with Ben Greenberg today, who mentioned that it will be on the plan commission agenda for the county on the 20th of this month, and then the land use committee and then the board will see it in March. So it's still going through the process at the county level, no matter what the town does here. We also amended the zoning ordinance at a public hearing to amend the text in the zoning ordinance to allow contractors' yards to be as small as 3 acres in the B3 and the I1 district. Again, that's going to be pending county approval with the same basic time frame for that one. And then the plan commission recommended and the board approved a conditional use for the contractor's yard. That was a joint public hearing. The county was also here for a public hearing on that. The county will review that at their their February 20th plan commission meeting. That doesn't have to go to the board, so that'll be wrapped up at the county by the 20th of this month. in the conditional use approval, there was a series of conditions that where the applicant needed to come back with a few items. And those included a landscape plan that included the screening and fencing. It also included a lighting plan, an updated plan of operation to include the limit as to the number of vehicles or trailers that would be stored outdoors within the fenced area. Also an updated site plan that would move the parking spaces instead of out front of the building to the side of the building. The Plan Commission also requested the petitioner provide an alternative site plan for consideration that would rotate the building, that would eliminate the overhead doors on National Avenue. And then finally, updated architectural drawings that would include upgraded materials for the office portion of the building, so that at least the office portion of the building would include, decorative brick or masonry for that portion, considering the rest of the building is largely metal panels aside from the base of the building itself. And so the petitioner has submitted some updated materials. You have an updated landscape plan there that shows landscaping that surrounds the perimeter of the fenced area. There's also a couple of, basically the total trees, there's 21 trees, mix of deciduous trees and also coniferous trees, so that sort of breaks up the fence along the entire fence length. There are, as mentioned as part of the conditional use process, there are existing trees along the east portion of the property, so that wouldn't need to be landscaped. I would note that where some of the trees are placed northeast of the fence, maybe one or two of those trees might actually not be constructed because they sort of conflict with that vegetated area already. So there's also a few trees that are planted out in front of the building, as well as adjacent to the right-of-way as well. So there weren't any specific landscape requirements that are set aside. As part of the conditional use process, the actual condition was that the fence be out there, that the landscaping be provided to break up and visually break up the fence, and that something at least 6 feet high in terms of a fence be put out there. And so they've also included a photograph of a wood fence that they're proposing that's 6 feet high that would be facing National Avenue. And they're also proposing that the remainder of the fence be a chain link fence that would have slats so you wouldn't be able to see through it. And again, the landscaping that's surrounded would also break that up. So the Plan Commission needs to determine if the landscape plan and the proposed fence is adequate to meet the intent of the conditional use. The lighting plan, there's lighting that's shown on the updated architectural drawings that were submitted. It basically all it is downward facing LED wall packs that are on the perimeter of the building. And then under the overhangs of some of the entryways, there's lighting as well. At the time I wrote the report, I didn't have the photometrics or the lighting specs, and so I have some comments on here in terms of setbacks and distances. But after looking at the photometrics for that were submitted, we have a maximum of a half a foot candle at the property line, and so will not be exceeded for the lighting plan. So
Sorry, say again, that will not.
they will not exceed the requirements that we have. They're less than that at the property line, and in fact, they're downward facing, and so it drops off pretty quick in terms of where the light spills, which is also diminished on the back of the building because it's all fenced and there's landscaping as well.
Any issue with the freeway with the lighting in the back?
No,
I mean, is there any additional requirements by DOT
oh
or
no,
something on the
not
parade?
not
Okay.
that I know of, and as I mentioned, they're all downward facing lights, so it's not going to be.
It's
clear.
not gonna go across the
No.
property line?
No, it's not going to make it past their fenced area.
Okay.
In terms of the plan of operation, you saw the plan of operation in terms of the conditional use. The only thing that wasn't decided on, again, is how many total trailers and vehicles would be maintained in the fenced area. And the argument, not the argument, but the issue was discussed is that we wanted some limit, some number, whatever you can live with. And I think the comment was made is that we just didn't want it to turn into a junkyard in some respect. We understand it is going to be fenced, but the Plan Commission did ask for a limit. To date, we haven't reached a number yet. Maybe we can talk about that tonight, and so we can come back to that. They have provided an updated site plan that does show the parking on the west side of the office. My only comments on that were, I think the loading dock material wasn't labeled as concrete, but we know it's going to be concrete, so that should be updated. I also mentioned that it should be considered that the parking spaces, they kind of protrude out 10 feet from the front of the building, and I thought, it looks like there's room there to bring them back, maybe with the face of the building. I also mentioned potential landscaping that could be put in front of the cars. I do know the applicant, Doug, mentioned that he didn't necessarily want to hide the parking spaces so that if they did get any visitors, that they would know where to park. However, there really aren't going to be that many visitors. Most of those are going to be employees that pull up for the day before they leave for the job. And so I guess that's up to the Plan Commission as to whether or not you think that's important to push the spaces back even more and to landscape the spaces. It's not a huge concern of mine. I did mention it as a potential condition. The only other thing is the sign was still shown on the site plan. It was too close to the right of way. We don't have a sign application in front of us today. If he wants to put up a sign, he's gonna have to come back to the board to get, to the Plan Commission and board to get sign approval on that, and so, that should just be stricken.
More than likely, yeah, we're gonna just
From the
remove
site
the
plan.
one that's on that site.
Right, exactly. So that's all I have for the site plan
So
itself.
there will be no sign?
No. Not a standalone sign out.
Even if it's on the building itself, it still needs approval eventually,
Yeah.
so you have to come
More
back
than
for
likely, it's
that.
gonna be on the building itself.
Okay.
So I'll come back for approval of that once we have one. I mean, I don't have as of right now, I don't have an idea
What it would look
where
like.
it's gonna be located, what it,
Yeah, and that's fine, just when, if this gets approved, just to mark up the site plan per whatever comments come on it tonight, and then resubmit to me or to Karen. So the other thought for the site plan was, it was mentioned that the Plan Commission wanted to see a different take on it with the building rotated in such a way that there wouldn't be any garage doors on the building. An updated plan was not submitted, but we do have an email from the petitioner's engineer that states that they did try to rotate the building, but that it wouldn't work due to truck turning movements. So you'll need to determine if that satisfies the requirement of the conditional use. Also, in terms of the architecture, you do have the lighting that's shown on the architecture, but there aren't any updated architectural drawings showing additional materials for the office portion. The petitioner has submitted an email that said that they will provide materials to meet the ordinance and whatever requirements. So you have committed to
we
putting,
haven't picked out what we're gonna put on there yet.
but you have committed for the entire
Yes.
office portion from ground to roof, you've upgraded materials other than metal,
Yes.
metal siding.
Yeah, I think you told us that last
Yeah.
time, right.
And the email confirms that, so whether or not you would need to see those again before you approved, or you would leave it up to staff to approve those. One of my conditions, so there's a couple things in the conditions. Condition 1A3 talks about the outdoor storage and number of vehicles, that's blank. We need to fill in a number there for the number of vehicles and trailers kept stored in the fenced area. And then condition 3 talks about the architectural drawings, and it's to be approved by either the town planner or the Plan Commission. If you don't need to see it again necessarily and would leave it up to me, we could strike Plan Commission and just have the planner approve the upgraded architectural materials, so that's up to you.
Well, that's or, so maybe they'll disagree with you, say, once town board approval.
After town board, before this gets to town
Or
board,
Plan
if you wanted to
Commission.
strike the Plan Commission and just leave it up to, so then they could approve it or not, once it gets there.
Could do it that way, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I marked that, what about town board, that'd be one thing.
Town board's still gonna see this, they still have to approve
This
this.
is still, this is gonna be a recommendation to the town. board.
Right, they still have to approve all this, and so if the town board thinks they need to see it, then they could change that condition.
Or require the plan commission.
Or
to-
require the Plan
Plan
Commission.
commission to approve it, too. One of the questions are you?
I'm done, yes.
Okay, one of the questions, and we talked about this on our call yesterday, was, and I got a big mark to myself, get this clarified. Who exactly are we issuing this to, and who is doing, what? We've got Doug Minen, yourself, we've got D&J and Sons LLC, and we have EMC Foundations, Inc.
D&J and Sons owns the building.
Okay, so they own the land, they'll build the building, they'll own the
Yes.
building.
And then my
They'll lease
forward
it.
wall
Company
company
is
will
EMC.
be renting the office and one shop, and I have another shop in there also. So,
Who's the other shop?
I don't have anybody for that as of right now.
So they would need approval. Whoever you
Yes.
get in there is gonna have to come back
Yes.
for approval.
For their site plan and approval, and, right?
It
Right.
would be a site plan.
It wouldn't be a site plan.
Well,
but
the
a-
condition, here's the thing, the conditional use was approved for Doug Mine and D&J and Sons and EMC Foundations.
The conditional use was approved for
Right,
them.
that's right. And so,
So if I had a tenant come in, I would have to have them come to the board and say, if they
well,
were to rent that
if they
other
were,
side for me.
if they were if they were a contractor's yard
Yes.
business,
Maybe not. Well, yes, they would, then, right?
if they were a contractor, if they needed use of the contractor's yard as a
Mm-hmm.
business, then they would need
They would
conditional
just
use.
have to
They
go
would
in.
need a conditional use,
Conditional use amendment, yes.
an amendment to your conditional use, right?
Right, let me take a look at that real quick.
See, I know when I was first going to Raymond, they didn't require that. They just had a ruling of, and they're a village now, and they had a ruling of, depending on what was parked inside or outside, they were following Racine County's rules. So it was a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
Muskego had no issue with, they just said, well, there could be another similar business or trucking business or something renting a shop, so they had no issue either.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, the thing is, we
That's
never,
why we wanna
never
get a-
discussed,
yeah, yeah,
as
we
part of
gotta
the
get-
conditional use, though, we never talked about another business. It was always D&J and Sons and then EMC Foundation. So specifically what the conditional use says is that, it's for approval of a contractor's yard. The uses are, operation of a poured foundation business, EMC Foundations, including the office use, indoor storage and warehousing, and the outdoor storage. And that's it.
So that's what their conditional use covers.
That's what the conditional use says. That's what was approved.
So anything outside of that,
Would require an amendment to the conditional use.
So I mean, if I have somebody that wants to rent, they'd have to come in front of the board and say, we'd like to get a conditional use to be able to,
Have to be a public hearing, just like last time. The county would
Okay.
also have to be here.
Unless we're,
Just a-
unless we're a village.
then it would just be here.
Yeah, then we wouldn't have to do that.
No, it would be
Right.
here.
Yeah, we still, but we would.
We,
involve the-
right, we wouldn't have the county involved then.
so I didn't know that, knowing that, like I said.
But you don't
last
have
few
anybody
places
there
I
to
went
even
to-
ask, right?
Yeah,
Right
I
now.
mean,
So it might be a
Right.
year or two down the road or whatever it is, but
Yeah,
just
I mean,
be aware that
it
would-
could just be
that-
my own stuff in that other side
And that's
until I
fine.
get to that point.
And that's
you know?
fine. But if it's another business, the conditional use will need to be amended for that other business. There's just no way around it the way it was approved. It was just
But
for,
that's fine.
it was for EMC Foundations to operate.
So Sean, on this, okay, who,
So
this is the site plan of operation. D&J and Sons is the owner of the site and the building.
Mhm.
The tenant is EMC Foundations, Inc.
Yeah,
That's the one running the business.
but the
Right.
site plan is attributed also to D&J. They own the
Right.
building, they own the site, all
Right.
those things. And the operator is
Is the
EMC.
tenant.
So I think it should be linked to both of them.
Okay.
I think D&J and
Okay.
Sons and
Is
EMC
it D&J
Foundation.
and Sons or DJ's Construction?
D&J and Sons.
Yeah, I have
That's
D,
just a
D ampersand,
property
G,
management
J,
company.
the word and spelled out, Sons LLC, no commas, no periods.
Yep.
Right. And if EMC was gonna own the building and everything else,
Then it would just be
then I think it'd
EMC.
just be MC, but I
Right.
think we have to link it to both.
And do we include Doug's name? Doug Minor
Yeah.
and the-
Doug Mine and doing business as
Okay.
is what I have.
And it's and, we're always concerned, the other question I had, we're always concerned about if EMC Foundations is sold. We're doing business with Doug Minen here, not whoever you sell your business to. And so the conditional use is to both of you.
It's tied to both of
It's
you.
tied to both of you,
That also
so
needs, yeah.
So even if
it's
I
not
did
to
sell
say
my
you can't,
business
yeah,
down the
you
road,
can
that-
sell your business, but the new owner's gotta come in and get his own.
Correct.
Conditional use.
Even though it's linked to EMC Foundations, Inc.? It shouldn't be.
Well, the CU is tied only to those two entities.
But if somebody else buys my board wall business and it was already tied to that entity,
Doesn't, because it says Doug Minor.
well, I mean, that puts me on the wall if I sell the building to somebody, then all of a sudden, they've gotta go through all this when it's already been used
When
as
they-
his business.
Maybe that's a question for the
That's,
attorney.
I mean, that's putting somebody up against the wall saying, well, once you change and retire and sell.
Sure.
Whoever buys this, they can't do it, they can't do what you were just doing.
Right,
with
but
this.
so a lot of places will
Right.
not tie it, they'll just tie it to the land. So the conditional use runs with the land. And so by default, that's what it does in a lot of places. The town of Vernon has a different approach,
Right.
largely because of the town attorney, and that conditional uses are tied to the owners and operators. And so any change in that use or that ownership requires an amendment to the conditional use. That's just the way it's done in the town of Vernon. So that's how the conditional use is approved, that's how the town attorney always recommends it be done. For the actual site plan of operation, it doesn't matter so much because the conditional use still is the overriding factor as it relates to the contractor's business.
Right. And that's right, and then if there's a new owner, he has to get a conditional use.
He's just gotta
then
come back. for
He's
a
just gotta
conditional
come
use.
back and, you know, the town of Vernon wants to know who they're dealing with, and I think, you know, our permits and licenses are not for sale.
Right. It's a way to make them aware of all the conditions, everything that's happened, and
Right.
so it's just the way it works here. So I
Okay,
think the
so-
site plan of operation should be both D&J and Sons, EMC Foundations.
Right,
One's the owner, one's the operator.
right. That's, you know, I
If
was
it- if it-
questioning,
if it-
I was questioning on the phone, well, what does D&J have to do with
If the
this?
town
Because
attorney
Because it's
just,
a
You're a
property
business,
management
yeah,
company.
because of the property. That's,
Anybody
right.
that has a business, that business never owns their building. It's too risky. There's
Yeah,
lot of
typically.
A lot of
companies that-
times, right.
yeah,
A lot of times, right.
it's the worst thing to do.
Yeah, it is quite common, to split it. Okay, so, I think we're okay
so I think,
there.
yeah, I think maybe you can include, if you do approve this, add a condition that the town attorney would review the conditions and make sure that the intent is met with regard to the ownership and the operation.
Okay. Okay, number of licensed vehicles. I know we talked about this the last time. I think you had a number in there, and then the more we talked, we said, boy, that maybe should be, possibly be a larger number. You know, we're willing to, you know, not restrict, I can't remember what was in there, 16 or something like that originally? And we talked about, well, maybe a larger number would be okay. Give yourself a little bit of room for expansion, so you wouldn't have to come back.
I was thinking, how many do you have now, and if you double the size, in case his business doubles,
Or, you know,
he's
or
covered.
Yeah, I
it
mean,
depends
if
on how much
if it
room you
doubles
have back
and
there
I
too.
Outgrow it, I mean, obviously, I gotta move somewhere else.
So we talked about things like 24 or
Bless you.
something like that, or 22, or,
So currently, right now, I have about 30, but that's including company vehicles, as in my everyday driver, some of the couple trucks that a couple of guys drive every day and take home, and the 2 semi-trailers. So basically, out of all 30, I want to say there is 10 of them are trailers, and the rest are vehicles.
and you're limited to space, obviously, you can only
Yeah, I mean,
put so
obviously,
many back
yeah.
there, right?
Mhm. But, like I said, if you put a limit on me, like, for example, once this is done, I've got to buy a $750,000 conveyor to have a second conveyor for my business. So, I mean, there's another large truck that has to come in.
Right. That's
So,
why we didn't want
To
to,
put a cap on it, it's restricting a business to grow. I mean, everything is licensed and insured and maintained.
well, and it's all supposed to be in the, necessary for the operation of the business. You're not
Mhm.
supposed to be,
Yes.
storing other people's
Mhm.
RVs and so on back there,
Mhm.
for example. Anyway, how many, what do you think, based on your current drawings, how many vehicles do you think you could put back there in total?
I haven't figured it out in the yard. The shop, the reason why the shop has the doors in back and front is because we're parked nose to tail
In the shop?
all three of those stalls, so
Right.
they're, and with the way it's set up with the wider doors, I mean, I'll get more than 6 vehicles inside the larger shop. More than likely. I'll probably get 8 inside of there.
Right, so the limit would be on the outside. I don't know that we care about what you can stick
Yeah.
inside, right?
But on the outside, for
Yeah.
example, a lot of the trucks that are inside, the backups for those trucks get parked outside. Cause if I have one go down, well, that crew's got to jump in the backup. That doesn't go out every day, but like I said, I think it's reasonable to say that everything has to be registered and the limit on nothing broke down over a year, because you're not gonna see inside that yard from National Avenue. And you go down I-43 and you see plenty of other businesses and their stuff from the freeway, but everything I have is gonna be in the fence.
Yeah, I'm fine
So
not
I
having
would
a number,
be-
as long as they're all licensed.
Right.
We have to have, yeah, but it's gotta be something, the conditional use approval is
Yeah.
specified, that we have to have, it's unavoidable, unless we amend the conditional use permit to a public hearing. That was the direction of the plan commission. That was a condition. It says vehicles or trailers.
Right. So we don't care if it's a vehicle or a trailer, it's just,
At the end of the day, when the plan commission was done discussing, that was the condition that was put in. And so we need to satisfy that condition.
so to your point, Supervisor.
All right, well,
So you're on, so you don't, you just need a high number, is what you're saying.
yeah, so, I mean, even if we said outside, it's not counting what's inside, he's got 30 now.
In
you
the
fit
fenced
probably
area.
14 inside. What if we just said, if you had all 30 outside?
Yeah.
Yeah,
You'd be fine, all 30 outside.
Yeah,
yeah, that would work.
That would work. That would give you,
So that's,
almost
yeah.
14 more.
Mhm.
I mean, you got one,
Then let's do that, and if for some reason, once I start fitting stuff in the yard, and if I do have a tenant that comes back in to the planning commission to wanna rent cause the other shop is 4,300 square feet,
it's pretty good size.
and that was my whole purpose, was to have rental shop plus my own shop, unless I grew big enough where I needed the entire building, so.
So you can come back without a public hearing for conditional use and modify the number of vehicles in the
Okay.
yard. That's no problem, just have to come back to the plan commission board, and
Mhm.
we change the plan of operation, because the number's not in the conditional use permit.
Right.
But again.
And we did that on purpose so we could avoid
Right.
going back amending the conditional
Right.
use.
But again, the new tenant would require the public hearing and the
Right.
conditional use.
That's
And
the
if I
new
get a
tenant, though.
They would have to come in, not myself. They'd
Well,
come in to petition to get a use permit.
you would be the landlord, or actually, it would be
Sons
D and
would be
J
the
and Sons would
landlord.
come in, because they're the landlord, right, Sean? And the tenant maybe also,
Because the permit was issued to you, it's a modification of that permit, you'd
Of
be a
my
part of it.
permit.
right? And the
The
tenant,
landlord's permit.
the tenant himself might also need his own permit, or some
Site-
kind of plan of
a site-
operation.
a Plan of operation
Operation.
associated with his business, right?
Right, he'll need a
Okay.
plan of operation associated with his business,
Well,
right?
that's why I was wondering,
Yeah.
like I said, I rent another shop in Raymond right now, and the landlord doesn't have to go in and do anything. Even though he holds the permit, I have to go in,
Sure.
so.
Yeah, that's for
why
your,
I
that's for
wanted to know
your,
that.
as a tenant, your plan of operation, right?
Right. Yeah, and that's typical too, but amending the conditional use permit itself is a different story.
Okay.
is letter E necessary? Do we really need to know what is licensed vehicles and update the list every 2 years.
Again, that was a condition that the plan commission added at the last meeting as part of the conditional use permit. So unless we modify the conditional use permit through public hearing,
No, I
that
don't-
came out of the plan
I don't
commission.
remember that.
Yeah, I think the concern, at least my concern, as I stated, is we didn't want this to become a quote-unquote junkyard. We wanted to keep it as a business, and, you know, you have that list. I mean, I didn't think it was burdensome. I don't like to impose requirements on, you know, people either, or businesses either, but you have a list for your insurance, and as I recall, it was like, okay, well, it's updated anyway, I'll just give you the list. So it wasn't a big deal. I remember it not being a big deal, you know, so it was like, okay, that would be, all right, if you know, gets
And so you know,
longer and
yep,
longer,
it's-
and so we
he's-
can check the
he's-
30,
he's
we
under
can
the 30 and-
check the operating, you know, if they're unlicensed, you know, and all that kind of stuff, so that's the reason why it was. That's
Yeah.
the reason why it was
Make
put
the
in as a
clerk go out there
condition.
and count them and
Well, Muskego does that to JJ Fry. He buys more cars for his lot. Muskego is hard on him, and I don't know why.
Yeah,
I mean, he's Fry Auto. He has a business, and when he's got more cars than they want to see, they have a fit with him.
Say again, last part, yeah.
And he's a used car salesman.
Oh,
They actually go out and count his cars?
Yes. They hassle him, so it's bad.
well, we don't intend to do that to you. Okay, what about, we're working our way through the list here, Sean. What about item 3, the approval of the office portion?
The architecture.
Yeah, do you want to, does the plan commission want to see that and approve it, or just approved by staff? Or, I suppose town board. Thoughts?
I don't think plan commission needs to see it.
Yeah, I agree. I think staff should be able to
Staff.
handle it, no problem.
Yeah, consensus, okay.
What was the number?
30. It's all right. So then that one approved by the town planner? And you're taking notes here too, Sean? I'm trying to
Yeah,
do the same
yeah.
thing.
Yep.
Because it's going to be, these are the conditions of our approvals, so that's why I wanted to make sure Sean had them, you had them, commission had them.
I did have some comments on the site plan. One was obviously remove the sign, and then I talked about labeling the concrete pad for the loading dock. And then the parking, pushing the parking back or not to add landscaping in front of it. I don't know if you have any thoughts one way or the other on that, if it's overkill.
Which condition are you in?
Right.
It's not a condition, it's in my, just this, my comments for the site plan.
When you say pushing it back, you mean,
Lining it up, because the parking moves north of the building face, right?
okay, right,
And so I'm saying push it back 10 feet or so to be parallel or further back than the building face. When I looked at it, when we talked about moving to the west side, it struck me as there's room there, we could certainly push it back to get all parking south of the building face. It's not a deal breaker for me, I only pointed it out for discussion.
but that's behind the fence, right?
No, it's not
That's-
behind the
that's-
fence, it's outside.
That's in front of the fence.
Right.
Okay.
So I don't know if you have the site plan in front of you or not to look at, but it doesn't make a huge difference one way or the other. But because there appeared to be room to push the parking back,
Behind the parking, that is, trucks go through a gate there,
right.
so I wasn't.
Yeah,
Trying to figure out.
So, here's the parking, I'm saying move them back.
I'm trying to keep this tree, that's my.
Oh, that's
Yes,
an existing
that's an
tree?
existing
Okay,
tree.
gotcha,
So I'm trying to keep all the existing large trees that are there.
gotcha.
And that was the other thing, of course, they sent another letter about rotating the building by snail mail, and it just showed up today, and I forgot that. And my engineers, they dropped it in the mail on Friday. So, and it takes 3 days to get a letter in Muskego if you mail it in Muskego. So,
Do you have a
That's
copy?
one, I do, I can email it tomorrow. So one thing that they mentioned is that with rotating the building,
Okay,
I would end up losing some of those existing trees that are there, and they didn't know what it would do to the retention pond or dry pond or whatever it's gonna be for the water runoff.
That's an old tree.
So that was their big concern with rotating it, and they said they've got programs to figure out the turning radiuses for tractor trailers, and they said it just was not working at all.
and even the concern was what, Sean, that there's overhead doors
That-
facing National?
That was the concern, yeah.
But even rotating it, how does that necessarily get rid of the, well, I suppose, depends on how it's.
From
How-
one direction.
Yeah, from one
Yeah,
direct, I
from
was
only
just
one
gonna say,
direction.
how does that get rid of the problem?
And that's why I brought up
It
the
just
comment
moves the
about
different,
Walter's
moves it to
building.
the different direction, right?
Yeah,
It does.
Because they're
So it
drive-through
does.
doors.
yeah.
In this regard, at least the loading dock is on the side of the building. The office is out front, half of the building is just office that protrudes out front. Those loading docks are set back 40 feet from the office portion of the building anyways. So,
But
yeah,
there is no fence in front of them.
there's no fence, no.
So the other question I had on the landscape plan, I thought we talked about, you had a 6-foot-high fence. We weren't requiring any of the trees to be taller than 6 feet at planting. It's got 8-foot trees listed.
You guys mentioned 8 foot.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I thought we
So that's-
changed it back down to 6 foot, because it was like overkill.
it was 10, no,
No,
it was 10 at
it was-
first, remember?
Right.
Yeah, it was
And
10
And
at
so we
first,
dropped it to 8,
dropped
which is
it to 8.
which is a typical evergreen tree planting size
That's not typical. Typical is 3 to 4 feet.
for an evergreen.
Yeah, when you go buy trees, they get expensive when you,
Sure, but for commercial operations,
and then you gotta have a tree spade come in and drop them in, because you can't get them bald and burlap that size,
right.
which really drives the cost up.
So,
They're gonna grow anyways.
Right, and that's why I think we
Yeah.
lowered them last time.
from 10, yeah, the
10.
requirement in the ordinance is 10 feet of screening unless it's modified by the plan commission. You modified it, and
Right.
so. I'm trying to see if it was actually required to be 8 feet, though.
I just remember thought it was the same size as the fence, but
Yeah, let me see what the.
You remember, John?
I don't remember. All I remember is it getting back down from 10 foot to 8 foot, because the county required 10,
Right.
and that's a little ridiculous, but.
Yeah, I know we were trying to,
The
reduce it
counties,
down.
as part of their conditional use review, they're gonna wanna see the site plan at some point. Whether they need it for the 20th or not, I don't know.
I wanted to get this up to them.
As soon as, after today, right.
But it's not a condition of the site plan, was it, Sean?
For what?
Was the tree planting, was that part of the sewer or
The,
the,
the conditional use required,
okay, those plantings? Because I don't see it as part of the.
it says a landscape plan including screening and fencing. Plantings are required along the exterior of the fence, excluding the gates, to soften and break up the length of the fence. That's actually all that was recommended. So if you want to say that they can be smaller than 8 feet, you can do that now.
I'd be fine with smaller than 8 feet. Because you're trying to break up the fence more or less, you know, so it's,
Say-
So 6?
Yeah, we can have it as a condition of, we can modify the landscape plan now that,
What do you think, Mr. Minor?
I would be fine with 6 foot.
yeah, trees aren't cheap.
No, they're not.
No.
Probably be fine with 4, too.
They got a better survival rate too when you plant them smaller versus larger.
Oh, do it, really?
we don't have.
Oh, yeah.
No, it's just, so the conditions that are in the staff report today for approval just say approval is subject to complying at all times with the plans and documents presented on February 12th, except as further restricted or modified herein. And so we can add another condition, if you'd like, to say that the landscape plans only need, or the trees only need to be 6 feet high. But we need to add that condition in.
Commissioner Swanee, you have thoughts on height of trees?
As long as
They
we have a
started at
6-foot fence there.
started at 10,
mean-
went to 8, now we're at fence height 6.
Yeah. I'd vote for 4 personally, but, I mean, we got a 6-foot high fence already. So now all we're doing is kind of breaking up,
The
Breaking up
fence,
the
The
fence,
fence.
because it's a
Right.
fairly long fence, yeah.
well, and you do have semi-trailers, what's the height of a semi-trailer? Sticking out above the fence, so there was some of that too, it's
Usually
breaking up the
some.
fence, and also when they get bigger, there'll be,
But those I don't plan on having, you figure,
there's 2 of
if
them.
one is in the dock, it's already dropped down lower
Right,
from that fence height. They're the van trailers, the enclosed.
So there's a standard condition in here that says the petitioner shall satisfy all comments, conditions, and concerns of the plan commission, town board, town engineer, town planner for the site plan, architectural drawings, landscape plan, lighting plan, and so as that's in the record, that we're only requiring 6 feet, it's basically covered by condition 4, because anything that's discussed tonight is a condition, or we can add it explicitly as a condition that says that the trees planted will be 6 feet in height,
minimum of 6.
minimum of 6 feet.
Probably be better to put it in there specifically.
Sure, to
so-
be
So we're
clear.
not scratching our heads, what did we
Right.
say? Commissioner Mahalik, are you okay with 6 foot too?
Yes, I am.
Okay,
I was shaking my head, yes.
okay. Yeah, that's what I thought, but I just wanted to confirm.
Right after 4. Yes, add a condition after 4 that says the minimum tree height.
Height at planting, right?
Yes. For the trees around the perimeter of the fence.
What are we going to, say about rotating the building? We received an email, some hard copy is on their way. What are the commissioners, I mean, that was a point of discussion, but that's why we asked you to look at it, because we're not gonna require something that's physically impossible to do, or, to me, drive up costs
Yeah.
for no,
So you don't need a condition for that, but you do need to, discuss whether or not that satisfies the concerns. That they've looked at it, they tried, there's tree concerns, there's truck turning moving concerns, and so it's not feasible.
I'm in favor of that.
it's fine with me.
okay. So Sean, Plan Commission consensus is no rotating, no
It
rotating
doesn't
the
have to be a
building, or,
condition, doesn't have to be a condition, just
Right.
that is part of the discussion, part of the record.
right, you're gonna give us a clean one of these anyway eventually, right?
Well, after this, I
After
usually
this.
clarify the conditions, if
Right,
there's
the
changes to
conditions.
conditions, and send it back.
Right.
This started with you talking about the parking, which is what on the directions aren't listed here. But they're what, on the west side of the office building? Where were you going with it, towards the south?
To the southeast, yes. So move it back 10 feet to the southeast to bring it parallel to the edge of the building, but it turns out that there's an existing, I thought that was a proposed tree.
Yeah. No,
And so
I
that's,
asked them
that's
to
an
try to
a large existing
keep
tree,
it.
and so that would have to be removed
Okay,
if the
fine,
parking
yeah.
got pushed back.
Yeah.
And so I'm fine with that, if the plan commission's fine with that.
I'd rather have the tree.
Right.
Yeah, so long as the
absolutely.
existing tree stays, there's, I'm fine with it,
It's
right?
on, the
That's
it's on the
what-
landscape plan.
Right,
so-
it's on, the existing tree is on the landscape plan? Okay. Commissioner Mahalik, Millie's, you're shaking your head, yes, okay.
Right.
Anything,
Does that cover everything?
questions?
So just
While we're-
for you, Doug, we'll just update the site plan, just to take the sign off of it, label the concrete pad, or have your engineer do it, send that back in. You don't have to update the landscape plan at all, because it's understood that they'll be 6 feet. And then the architecture, once the architecture, we're still gonna need to see it,
Yeah.
and the materials, send it to Karen, and then we'll take a look at it and move on from there. Assuming that's the motion that happens.
And Mr. Chairman, if the plan commission does approve this, do you want Mr. London at the town board meeting next week? Or do you feel you could just do it without Mr. London? You have three board
What's the-
members.
Yeah, we have
Yeah,
3 board
exactly.
members. I don't know that we need to haul you back
boy.
to the board. I
If
mean, this is
don't
just a
have to,
recommend,
I just moved a Cub Scout den meeting to that night because half of my boys couldn't make it, of course.
you bring them here and make it a civics lesson.
No, actually, they do, to finish their Arrow Light, they have to talk to somebody from the municipalities. So,
Oh,
and I didn't take them into Muskego.
You said you don't wanna go to Muskego?
No,
ask them why they need to count the cars at the,
yes.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question. No, I don't know that we necessarily need to bring him in at a town board meeting since you've been here tonight, so. So we could put it on Thursdays, March 20 to keep things moving.
Okay.
And the county's timeline, that would still fit. I mean, we're moving faster than the county, I think.
Yeah, they won't have final approvals until March. Now, you still have to get the stormwater approved from them.
Yes, which I
And so,
think SEH was already applying.
yep, and so
for.
everything's, even if they approve everything else, that's probably I don't know if that's gonna lag or not, but that's probably gonna be the toughest thing to get through.
Yeah.
And so you won't get your actual conditional use permit or your site plan of operation permit until everything's done, until they finish their rezoning, their conditional use, stormwater, and then, once that's all done, we'll give you your permits.
Okay. Which I should have the building plans updated soon, so that Pino Buildings can send it through state.
Oh, right.
Okay. I haven't talked to Vince in a while.
I'll text you. Just,
No, I haven't. Trust me, I haven't.
so there's
So then we just need to approval?
So we're looking, we're looking for a plan commission, a motion from the plan commission to recommend to the town board to approve the site plan and plan of operation request for Doug Mining, and this would include D&J and Sons LLC and all 3 EMC Foundations, Inc. for the property stated and subject to the conditions in the February 12, 2020 full staff review report as modified by our
Discussion
discussions.
tonight, yep.
Discussions tonight at this plan commission meeting.
I'll second that.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously, so we're still ahead of the county.
All right.
Thank you, Doug.
Yep.
Mr.
Yep,
Minor.
Thank you, guys.
be in touch.
Yep. Have a good night.
Good night.
Yep, you too, drive safely.
Yep.
Little snow on the ground.
Snowing as I came in.
Yep,
Yeah, it's
snowing.
just- It's just starting,
Yeah, that small stuff.
All right.
2 to 4 inches tonight.
Oh, I always call it the full staff review, but report,
Yeah.
you know. We know what it is. It says full staff review report on the top, right? Okay. Yeah, Sean's got a company. It stands behind him.
They have no idea what I do.
Dazzling what you do.
All right. Speaking of Sean Malarkey and full, we've got item 6, discussion of potential amendments to the Town of Vernon Land Division Control Ordinance. As you may recall from our staff meeting, that was one of the items on the agenda that we should really start looking at this, and Sean said that he would provide a report and to get the discussion started, and we, by consensus, agreed that when we had a little time at Plan Commission, that we'd start looking at this. And I don't think we'll have time in March, but we have, it's 8:15. We're not gonna go all night here, but at least get the
the ball
teed up
rolling,
and people starting to think about it, so that we can get this one, get it done, I hope
So
sometime.
let me preface
Sometime
it,
this, sometimes
Ex-
in the relative near future.
let me preface it by saying, yeah, it's snowing outside. I got a long way to drive tonight, and so I'm happy to stay as long as you want to talk about this tonight, but again, you haven't had a lot of time to look at it and review it yet, so I was thinking we'd kick it off, just describe real quickly what we're after here and what we're doing. For those of you that weren't part of the, discussion, most of you were. Can we take these items together?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're on number 6 and 7. 6 is potential amendments to the Land Division Control Ordinance, and 7 is to the zoning ordinances.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, shouldn't this be the ordinance committee, they would look at this?
Yeah,
Nice try, Jim.
Yeah. The reason why these two items are on the Plan Commission as opposed to the Ordinance Committee
Yeah.
is because
Thanks
they
for that.
deal with the Land Division Control, which is implemented by the Plan Commission, and also zoning. I mean,
Right.
it's implemented by
We
zoning.
touch these all the time.
Right, right. So that's why.
So in terms of the land division, development control ordinance, a couple of things we talked about for a while now. One is the threshold for subdivision. And so in the town of Vernon, a division of 2 lots at the same time, at one time, constitutes an actual subdivision and not a CSM. That's a lot more restrictive than most places. I have provided some examples in here from Waukesha County, surrounding communities, the state of Wisconsin in terms of what's a plat. And so typically it's 5 or more divisions of lots 1.5 acres or less in size at one time is a subdivision plat, or over the course of 5 years would be a subdivision plat. So ours is much more restrictive. I just want to put it out there for consideration. We've already granted one waiver from that for the Hibbard CSM that was approved about a year ago. That's actually going to be coming back to be modified. So we still have that tool at our disposal. We can still grant waivers from that, but I just want to put it out there for consideration because I think, it's probably overly restrictive. We don't see a ton of development right now as it is, and so I can't think of a real good reason to require a 2-lot division to be a subdivision. That automatically requires county review. That automatically is much more complicated, more costly to prepare a preliminary plat and a final plat and get that approved through the state and everything else. So that is probably more cumbersome than it needs to be. We don't have to make a decision on that tonight, but just wanted to bring it up. The other,
Do we know why we picked 2 in the first place?
That's old, it's really old now.
Okay.
yeah, I don't have my recollection. The only thing I can guess is that they wanted to slow development at some point in time and make it a little harder to divide lots.
That's really, it's old.
Yeah, I mean, it's a roadblock to doing land
So,
divisions.
so what number do you suggest?
Probably 5, the same as other communities.
Looks
mean,
like Waukesha County's at 5, the state of Wisconsin.
I've,
is
everything
at
I've
5.
listed from surroundings, the state
Town
and
of
the county is all
Waukesha's at
5.
5.
Fine,
Yeah.
I'd be
I would
fine with
say-
switching it.
Yeah, I was, you know,
I know too, in the land division control ordinance, there's things I would like to plan, and there's things that Vince would like you to look at, so.
There is, and John Macy too. There are a number of things that legal review, based on legal, recent statute changes that have to be put in the subdivision ordinance. So these are just from my perspective. There's probably gonna be more things coming as we kind of tie it all together and bring it back, so.
so we'll take notes and we'll
Yeah, if we
package
did-
it all up. If we reach consensus on substantive matters, you know, while we're discussing, we could, you know, take notes and.
Exactly,
And
so
work them into the final document.
we'll probably bring this back in a couple months, with some more changes.
Right.
The other thing was the residential development control section. If you remember from the Pheasant Run plat, when we went through that scoring chart, it was, from my perspective, it was a mess. Tough to score, tough to follow, a lot of the criteria redundant or ambiguous, and I didn't think it did what it was supposed to do. I mean, the whole point is to establish criteria that ensures a high-quality subdivision. I don't think it quite got them right. So I'm suggesting we change that to simplify that a little bit, to get our criteria right, to get our weighting and scoring system right, to really make subdivisions. And so we'll probably need to discuss a little bit about, well, what makes a good subdivision? Does it mean entrance signage? Does it mean a certain amount of open space? And so does it mean a minimum square footage of a home? Whatever it is, we're gonna have to put those criteria in and make sure people meet it. The other thing is, the way the rules are written now, it requires county stormwater approval, an approval letter for county stormwater even before you would allot residential development control. And the cost behind that is too burdensome to ask somebody to do before you even submit your preliminary plat. Because if you can't meet the criteria, you just spend, I don't know, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, and you can't make it work. So I think we need to be cognitive of what criteria that we're asking for, that's not too burdensome upfront. So, again, I'll probably come back in a couple months with some recommendations for some criteria and some weighting, and then we can talk about them and then move on from there.
Yeah, I think the important thing, at least to me, is I think these criteria does produce a better subdivision.
Right.
It's in everyone's best interest in the town of Vernon, the residents, to have high-quality subdivisions and, you know, for property tax base and everything else. I mean, we don't, you know, type of people who move in here, community, tax base, everything. I think everybody benefits from, you know, valuation of their homes. Everybody benefits from high-quality subdivisions. We have to have something. But I agree, when we went through it, the Plan
It
Commission
was
was
very hard.
lost. I mean, it was just, it was so confusing and ambiguous.
Good idea, but
Yeah.
It is, and some things were counted twice. I mean, corridors were mentioned in different criteria.
Criteria,
It's like, well,
you're
we already
right.
gave points for that, but I guess we have to give it again, and,
Right.
yeah, it was hard to follow. So we will do our best to clean that up. The other thing is the changes to the zoning ordinance in terms of conditional use amendments. As everybody knows, conditional uses now are basically permitted uses, provided the applicant can meet all the conditions that are established in the ordinance and the town plan commission and town board. And so we thought it'd be best at this point in time to just strike and repeal a certain number of conditional uses now, the ones that don't necessarily have appropriate conditions with them that would protect the town enough, where they're just too easy to meet the conditions. And so on the second page of my memo, I've outlined the ones I think now should be removed. The ones that would potentially stay are the ones that aren't struck. I've also added the event barn conditional use back in, because we worked hard in establishing the conditions for that one, so that's in there. I've removed telecommunication facilities and replaced it with wireless telecommunication mobile service facilities. That was written by Attorney Macy. That's sort of a model ordinance that he has, that basically protects us to the greatest extent possible allowed under the state law. So that's in there now. There's also a potential, there's language in there that adds a provision that recognizes all conditional uses that exist today. So let's say there was a antique shop in a residential district that exists today, but we've stricken the use. They can still come back to the Plan Commission and modify their conditional use permit, add on, expand, as if it existed today in the code, but we would be reviewing it for the provisions that used to exist. So we don't want to make anybody, non-conforming through this process. We want to give everybody a chance to operate their business as, or their conditional use as it is, and even the ability to expand it, even though it's struck from the list of ordinances. So I provided a sort of a redlined list of the uses. There's even some language in there that talks about substantial evidence and other things that are based on the new law. So again, it's a starting point. We'll bring this back in a couple months. I'm not sure if I'm going to work any more on this one because it's sort of at a place now where we can take a look at it. The only other thing I want to add is that the uses that are stricken doesn't mean that have to be gone forever. We can add those in at a later time. A petitioner can come back and petition for a use to be added, just like the event barn happened. In addition, the county is going to be looking at their conditional uses over the course of the next year. Their zoning ordinance is very similar to ours. A lot of the uses are the same. We can piggyback on that as they tune up some of their uses. We can, if we like them, we can pull them back into our ordinance as well. So that should save some time and some money and some effort. And they're going to ask for our opinions on those anyways, one way or the other. So that's all I have. Like I said, I'm going to bring both these back probably in a couple months, and we'll just continue until we get it right. We'll just keep moving on.
Yeah, on that, it strikes me as it's going to be at least a two-step process, maybe multi-step. One is if we can decide relatively quickly on what to repeal just to protect the town,
Right.
we could do the repeal and then work on the replacement if we felt,
If we want to.
if we want to do the replacement, and at the same time, maybe tune up some of the other ones.
Correct.
That,
So
that may need some,
there's no danger in removing these conditional uses. The existing ones can go on and
Right.
operate as they currently are, and we can add the ones back in when we're ready to do so.
right. Commissioner Solani.
Where do we define what we put into the conditional use?
In
In the
the,
ordinances.
Because we talked once where we had, I may get backwards, but where we had too much information in the conditional use because we wanted to change it, then we'd have to, that was a big deal.
so right now, the ordinance has a list of conditional uses that are permitted. And under each one of them, there's a series of conditions that have to be met. Some have one or two, some are more extensive. And so we start with those, and then the Plan Commission and the board have the right to modify those or add on to those as they go on. So that's how that's where they come from.
Okay, but I thought we were talking about moving a lot of that information to the site plan.
Oh, yes, site plan of operation. So,
Right.
yes. So if it's written in the ordinance itself, it's got to end up in the conditional use.
Okay,
itself.
that's-
So additional things we add on to it can eventually just be put into the site plan of operation if we want to.
Because, like with the event park, different things came up
Right,
that might have been unique to that particular situation.
right.
So we wouldn't want to.
Did not in the permit, yes. Yeah, I agree. And so we should be cognizant of that as we replace these or rewrite these in terms of how it's written.
Right, absolutely. And the question's always going to be is, should it be part of the conditional use, or should it be part of the plan of site plan of operation?
Right.
Where's the most appropriate?
So,
Right, so one criteria is ease of amendment, but, the
the important
other
stuff, the
criteria
important
is-
stuff that you really
stuff
care
is
about
better
should
be-
stay in the permit.
Right, I was gonna say the other side is that what is important, what is the, we have public hearings for a reason, we wanna hear from the public on the important stuff, so.
Right.
Sean, have you heard anything from the federal government decommissioning the applications of cell towers in Webco? I mean, that's something that town of Vernon did years and years ago, put and the Webco easement up on the towers. And I just heard within this week, two different people that work for cell towers saying that by 2021, they all have to be off the Webco and relocate onto.
I actually do not know. Attorney Macy may have more information. I don't know off the top of my head on
I
that
have
one.
two different, saying that, I mean, they're actually on Webco.
And they're on Webco power lines, or
Right.
power poles right now, and they have to be moved off of
They
them.
have, yeah, the federal government's ordering all those cell towers to decommission all that equipment,
And so they have to move to another tower
Right.
or a new tower.
right? So I just
No.
wondered if you.
No, I do not have
Okay.
information on that.
We better see if we can get, if we have to, as long as we're amending our
So
ordinances.
the
we
wireless,
better-
yeah, the
We
wireless
better work in
telecommunications
what's
stuff.
gonna happen next year, if that's really
Right.
true.
And so
right?
that's in here. The sort of the best you can possibly do with an ordinance is in here as a draft amendment. And
Okay.
so, again, Attorney Macy wrote that for another community, but it's it's basically a model for as much as you can regulate on those.
Right, yeah,
Right.
right. The federal government did restrict the
And the
states.
state.
States and local municipalities
Right.
from, doing, regulate in their view, over-regulating.
Like wind
Right.
turbines, it's very similar.
Hmm?
Like wind turbines.
Right. Even though the impacts are local.
Right. We had a condition where, this last gentleman we talked about, that would have to submit a list of his trucks and trailers
Every 2 years.
every 2 years. What mechanism do we have to tell us to be looking for that?
We'd have to create a spreadsheet.
2 years from now, who's gonna think of that?
We'd have to have a date, a list in the date of what's required by who. And so that would be something that,
I mean, it's easy enough to do that, so we'll start that for here in 2 years.
Yeah, I mean,
Whose responsibility is
and
it?
whose responsibility is
The
to,
building inspector,
to
the
check-
planner?
well, it says in that particular case, it says the plan commission will review it every 2
Right.
years. But it would be up to potentially the clerk to put it on the agenda
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
to
have,
get it on the
and
agenda
notify
and-
the applicant to say, hey, you need to come in.
right. Well, just send it in, really.
Just send it in, yeah.
Right.
If you have a problem and you need to come back, then that's fine.
But the start date wouldn't be until he's actually up and running,
Right.
Right.
just in a moment of time.
It's just, from my time on other committees and the like, it seems to me that we've had other things like that in the past.
I'm
Now,
sure
I
they slipped through
wonder,
the cracks.
Do we really look at those?
I'm sure certain things have slipped through the cracks in the past, but we probably should have a mechanism to trigger those.
Well, and we're meeting on all the conditional use. We've got so many conditional use that have terminated. Our conditional use file is something that has to be, so that's another thing that would start with the plan commission is a review of, do you terminate them, the whole list, and what are the conditions of approval?
Right.
That's another homework project.
There will not be a shortage of work. That is for sure.
Thank you, Sean.
You're welcome.
Safe drive, Sean.
Yeah, I'll
safe
be careful.
Safe drive.
That's
And I've got a lot
bipolar
more,
snow.
I know, Jim, you gotta be.
Yeah, oh, you will, yeah.
just to trust the whole street.
You didn't drive over?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, table these minutes
Yeah.
tonight.
That way, because there's a couple things that.
Yeah,
way
like,
Sean's work could
like
do
chairman
this.
was present.
Yeah.
So
And
we're
then
gonna
plan
table?
commission could do it at the.
At the next 20th?
Plan.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to table the approval of the January 8, 2020 Town Board and Plan Commission minutes until our next Plan Commission meeting.
I'll second that.
Any discussion?
Is this the record for the most pages for minutes?
Yeah, and there will be some changes, at the very first, I was present at that meeting because I was calling for,
notice it.
I called for roll call, and so she noticed the roll call and somehow skipped me. But anyway, so there will be some changes. Hopefully not very many. But, yeah, it's 16, 17 pages.
Can I make a motion?
We need to take a vote on tabling. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed?
Oh, we didn't finish.
Motion carries unanimously.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Is there a second?
Second?
Is that Jeff Molly?
Chris?
All in favor of adjournment? Opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned. Thank you, gentlemen. Madam? Drive safely.